Welcome to Operation Self-Reliance. My name is Philip Gleason. I am a director of the Academy of Self-Reliance. Preparedness is so much more than food storage. I would like to share a personal story that is indicative of this. Years ago, with a young family, I had 3 baby girls that were 3 and under. We were in charge of a project in Mountain Home, Idaho at the Air Force Base. And it was a project that was only supposed to last for 6 months. It turned out lasting 18 months, so we ended up spending the winter in Mountain Home, Idaho. And we were in a travel trailer in a trailer park, and everything was good. Our propane had been lasting about 2 weeks, so we were good with that. And when the holidays came, we headed off to Grandma and Grandpa's, and it was just a week long, so we didn't worry about the heat or anything freezing. But when we came back, we arrived Sunday night at midnight, and it had turned bitter cold. And it was not only 0 degrees outside, it was 0 degrees inside. Now, the problems that created was our water was frozen. We were unable to prepare any food, as well as it being cold. And this was before wet wipes, and we had no way to clean babies. It was midnight, and 6 a.m. was when everything opened up, so we thought no problem. We loaded the babies in the bed between us. We had an electric blanket. We turned it on high, put the other blankets on top of us and the coats, and we were good until about 3 a.m. in the morning when the power went out for the whole trailer park. It only took a half hour for that cold to penetrate through the bed, the covers and everything, to the point that we were no longer able to keep our babies warm, and they began to cry. I have to tell you, that next 2.5 hours rewired my brain. The following morning, I made sure I had 2 other backup sources for heat. In fact, over the years, I've put together a presentation for emergency light and heat with things found in your kitchen, your bathroom, and your garage. I learned that with the right knowledge and the skill set, I could have dealt with all those challenges because we had everything we needed in the trailer, but it was a lack of knowledge. Well, as the years rolled on and my family grew, and there was a period of time I decided we need to have 2 years worth of food storage. And so I went to a lot of work. I got it all together. I felt good. We had 7 children at the time. And it took me a couple of years to get all the food storage and everything that I needed for 5 daughters and 2 sons. In fact, I was feeling pretty good about what I had accomplished. And I was sitting up in bed one morning and just kind of reveling in the fact, yeah, that was a big project. We got that done. And then I heard a little voice. And this little voice said, "What are you going to do if the problem lasts 2 weeks longer than resources you have?" Totally messed up my paradigm. That was when I got serious about sustainable food production and started learning about greenhouses. And got involved with Robert Bang, and we started manufacturing and creating greenhouses and teaching classes. And that was when I found 84 acres in a small rural southern Utah community. We had 3,000 foot of the river. I built a half-acre fish pond, created and operated 15,000 square feet of organic food-producing greenhouses. It was amazing. I loved it. In fact, I owned 10% of the water that flowed through that valley. That first July I was there, towards the middle of July, the water dried up, my irrigation water. I was so busy putting in infrastructure that I didn't give it a whole lot of thought. But the next year, when I had crops in the ground and the water dried up again about mid-July, I went to the city fathers and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" They said, "Oh, you got the top 10% of the water, and when that's gone, it's gone." I said, "Whoa, time out, guys, time out." I said, "That isn't what the paper says." Well, anyway, they said, "This is what we've been doing for years. We need the water. This is just the way it's always been." Well, I had to go get an attorney. I got an attorney. sent them a letter, and within an hour of them receiving that letter, they showed up. Turned out that the pond that they had created to divert the water was on my property. So needless to say, they straightened it out, but it created a sore spot because resources are limited in these small communities. I'd never seen that before. And it took me a while to understand what was going on because I was upset. I have to admit that. But because as a project manager, you have to be a problem solver. You don't just wring your hands. You have to be a problem solver. So I really wanted to understand what was going on. So I backed up and I started looking at these small rural communities with different eyes. And I realized that it was not only limited resources, it was limited jobs. In fact, when my kids were going to the school, we were not only outsiders, but we were now taking positions on the athletic teams and the other programs in the school that other kids had planned on for a long time. Coming to understand the limited resources in these small rural communities totally opened up a new window of understanding for me. I knew that there was going to be a problem in the cities with limited resources, but I'd always assumed that these small agricultural towns or communities would be a safe haven. And with my new understanding, I saw that they were like the cities on steroids. You take away their fuel, you take away their electricity, you take away their communications. They are crippled because they are as dependent as the cities are. And so this was a new understanding, and it left me in a situation where I didn't know where to go for safety because I'd now understood that preparing every needful thing was way more than just food storage. And so with my babies in mind, and now it's grandchildren, I've come to understand that there is another way, and it's under the Operation Self-Reliance. And I want to explain Operation Self-Reliance is an umbrella. It's a concept of preparing every needful thing, and it takes more than one individual or one company. So there's partners participate in Operation Self-Reliance. We have the Academy, which we'll tell you more about. We have the OSR community. We have the Utah OSR Land Cooperative, which we will introduce to you. And then Natural Resources, the Village Drill, and others. And this list of partners is growing weekly. So this is not only an introduction, but it's also an update because we've been involved in Operation Self-Reliance for over a year now. So the question is, why self-reliance? Self-reliance is being self-determined, all right? And to be self-determined, you have to prepare every needful thing. And in order to prepare for every needful thing, you need to know what you're preparing for. So if you understand that resources are going to be limited or interrupted, then what would preparing every needful thing look like? I'm going to give you my personal view, and I'm going to let you read it so that you can picture it in your own mind. How does that feel? We have found that there is a small demographic of people that want to be self-reliant. Most people just want to be taken care of. They want to know that as long as they turn the switch, the light comes on, they go to the store, they can find whatever they need. We've just been introduced to a new culture. And yes, there's a flu going around, the coronavirus, and yes, that may create some real problems for us. But people who are not prepared and don't understand, let's just say it creates fear and it creates panic. But if you can prepare every needful thing, we've been told if you're prepared, you need not fear. So Operation Self-Reliance had two partners to begin with, okay? The Academy of Self-Reliance and then OSR Green, a consulting management firm that helps families prepare every needful thing. The purpose, this is a clear concept to help families transition from a city lifestyle of dependencies, such as your water and your power and your food and all of the 16 different infrastructures that are in place, to a country culture of self-reliance with like-minded neighbors and remaining debt-free. Okay, now that's the big challenge because our lifestyle is based on debt and many things that we're doing. So in order to see how you can make the transition here, we had to determine why people would want to leave the city. One of the first things we found was people's health, whether it's the air, whether it's the water, the traffic, all of the congestion that takes place in a city is difficult on our health. Safety was another item, whether it's safety from things now or safety from things in the future. We just had an earthquake here in Utah County, and just a reminder of what we're facing. The professionals tell us that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to have a very large earthquake from the Wasatch Fault. Now, whether you're living up in Oregon or you're living in California or near the Madrid Fault or any place along the coast, considering safety of things now, maybe in the future. But this was the biggest reason, family. We found that people were tired of struggling to just go from check to check and then dealing with all the peer pressure that their children had, the challenges at work. They wanted a reset. So essentially, if we were to condense this down, it's changing city lights for starlight. If there was a path that could help you step by step towards self-reliance. Now understand that a pathway towards self-reliance is different than somebody saying, okay, here's a coloring book, go paint between the lines, and then you come up with a picture. A self-reliant individual learns principle-based practical solutions. What do I mean by that? If you understand that gravity pulls things down, it goes way beyond just keeping your foot out from underneath the rock that you're going to drop. You can utilize gravity with falling water to produce power. Principle-based practical solutions. Bottom line on that, if you understand the principle and the practical solution doesn't quite fit, a self-reliant person can think about the principle, change the practical solution to fit their particular needs. They're problem solvers. And many of us are problem solvers, but we've been narrowed down and isolated to very specific areas. See, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they could move on to a piece of land, give them some water and some time, and they could create not only food for them, but for an abundance for others, and through that be able to build a home and a place of safety for their family. We're finding people want to get back to this type of self-reliance. So let's come back to the path. If there was a path, how could that benefit my family? How could it benefit your family? Now, like we mentioned, there are challenges. In fact, these are some of the challenges we've identified. Okay, the land and development costs. You go out to a rural piece of property and it's raw ground. There's a lot of land and development costs associated with it. Lack of services. It used to be when you set up a farm that the power company would bring the power to you. Well, now it costs you $15,000 to $20,000 a pole, but you're still reliant on them. So if the power goes out, you have no control over that. Limited jobs. In times of challenges, when there's a constriction in the economy, jobs become very limited. Don't know how. Like I say, we are disconnected from those generations that came before us that knew how to work with the land. Till we really started researching, we didn't realize how important knowing your neighbors, knowing what kind of neighbors you have, knowing what type of expectations they have. What are your expectations? So not knowing someone creates a void. Being a project manager, I identify problems, but I wouldn't be very good at my job if I couldn't identify solutions. So I and others on the Operation Self-Reliance councils, we have found real solutions, okay? And the interesting thing is they always begin with a cooperative effort. Okay, now to define cooperation, this is a group of people doing something that a single individual can't. Examples, we have over 30,000 co-ops in the United States. We have over 300 million memberships to co-ops here in the United States. There's 5 different types of co-ops, all right? There's the consumer co-op. Example, Costco. You pay for your membership and you get to participate in the bulk buys. Then you have the producer co-ops such as IFA, Intermountain Farmers. This is a group of small agricultural producers, some not as small as others, but they come together so that they can compete with the great big conglomerates. And they can compile all of their produce or they can compile all of their grain, but now they can provide enough quantity that they can participate in the world market. Number 3, employee-owned co-ops. Employee-owned co-ops are such as Wenco, which is a grocery store, Nucor Steel. In fact, Italy and Spain, 1/3 of their national gross product is produced by employee-owned co-ops. Now, how these come about is that they work for the employees work for a large corporation, but when the economic downturn comes, which it always does, then these big corporations, they can no longer compete. So they start taking out bankruptcy or laying people off. Well, what happens, you get certain groups of individuals that come together that work for a company and they say, look, let's buy the company. So they buy it. Now, an interesting thing happens. You now own the company that you work for. Your brain changes. It's no longer do you show up, so you put in your 40 hours so you can get your check. It is like, oh, I own the company. So now my decisions, my choices, how I treat people or customers has an effect on my check at the end of the day. So they find that these employee-owned cooperatives become very competitive and they do very well in challenging times. The next point here was very interesting. When we learned that over 1 million people in the United States own their land and their houses in a co-op, over 1 million people. And as we researched, we found out why we didn't see more of those, because these co-ops are non-profit. There's no money in it for developers. With this new opportunity, when I say new, because we're just learning about it, but it's been around since the 1840s. Community-wealth.org. This is a great resource to learn about co-ops. Community-wealth.org. I highly encourage you to research out and learn more about cooperatives and how they really work. Now, I mentioned 4 of the main co-ops. The 5th is a hybrid of all those. So we'll be talking about practical applications for a cooperative. Now, the number 1 challenge was the land and development costs. So if you have a land cooperative, this is where a group of people can buy a large piece of land that a single individual probably could not obtain by himself. You own it together. Each is a shareholder. Now, if you own part of a company, say you own 50% of a business, and you have 50% of the shares, then you're a 50% owner. All right. In a co-op, it's similar. Each shareholders, but in this co-op, 1 share, 1 vote. What's very unique about that is that with 1 share, 1 vote, no one individual can get more power than the next person because he has more money or his house is bigger. Okay. 1 share, 1 vote. And then a shareholder, they get an exclusive use of a portion of the land. Now, people have told me that you cannot own your land in a co-op. It's absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. Over 1 million people do this. And what it is, you own your share and you are given a piece of that property, okay? And you receive that under agreement. It's called a proprietary occupancy agreement. Now you can buy these shares or you can sell these shares, but there's a unique thing with an agricultural cooperative or a housing cooperative, and that is you can retain the right to have like-minded people. Whereas in a regular subdivision, whoever has money, you've got to sell it to them, all right, if you're offering it to the public. Whereas in a co-op, you don't have to. And people say, well, you can't discriminate. Well, how many 55 and older communities are you aware of? See, it all comes down to the legal establishment. I want to introduce you to Granja Porcon. This is an agricultural co-op in Peru. 35 plus years ago, 3 men went to the Peruvian government and said, give us some land and we promise that none of our people will ever get on the welfare rolls. So the government did. They gave them 10,000 hectares. Now what's interesting is this land that they gave them, what you're looking at here, looked much like southern Utah. The very first thing they did was started planting trees. They planted 2 million trees. Changed the climate, tempered the hot sun, warmed up the winters. Water no longer ran off and caused erosion. They put in the ground cover. As you can see, this was beautiful. A friend of mine actually was there a little over 2 years ago, and he introduced me to Granja Porcon. And when I first started going to their website, it was an agricultural website. But because of their success, they have over 4,500 members, no debt, and totally self-reliant, but they've become a destination, a worldwide destination. People come from all over the world to see what they've done. So now not only do they have a timber industry, they now have a tourist industry. Solution to challenge number 2, okay, lack of services. Now most of us know that going green is either recycling things or going solar or some alternative energy. But going green is a lot more than that when you really get into it, whether you're dealing with your food or your animals or your sanitation or your water supply. All of these things, going green means working with nature, not fighting it. So number 3, limited jobs available. Now we talked about the land co-op. This is like a big, or agricultural co-op, this is like a big umbrella. What's cool about this is that this land co-op can own multiple businesses underneath that are sheltered. And we're going to show you some really cool reasons why an agricultural co-op, which is under Title III of the Utah Code, is an amazing piece of legislation. But let's talk about the land co-op. Say you buy together, a group of you come together and buy 1,250 acres. Say a ranch, and you want to make sure that you have the equivalent density of about 5 acres per family. Now, that would be enough land for 250 families. Everybody gets 5 acres. The problem with 5 acres is too big for a family to take care of without a tractor, without a bunch of mechanized equipment. Now we have multiple templates of people that are very successful on 1.5 acres to 2 acres, and they do it low tech. And what we're talking about successful, they're able to make incomes over $100,000. There's a template where a gentleman is teaching people how to raise rabbits to earn $4,000 a month on a 1/2 acre. So if you have the land co-op and you give each individual their own 2 acres, they can operate that in low tech. So for preparing every needful thing, we may not have access to big tractors and everything. So let's look at some of the things that can come underneath the land co-op. For example, if you buy a ranch that was cattle and sheep, in the beginning you could continue to set part of that land aside to do that. Growing grain or alfalfa, you could set part of the land to do that. But let's talk about say you own your own construction company under the land co-op. So if you have 250 families, they each need a home and a barn, and some can build their own, but others may not be able to. So if you own your own construction company, first thing that will happen, because you don't have to have the high overhead, the fancy offices so that you can impress clients, because you own this and you're building for yourself. You don't have to have profit because it's a nonprofit. So you get your construction costs at cost. You could cut 25% right off. Now, if you owned your own tradesmen, in other words, your own subcontractors work for you directly, you could shave another 10 to 15% off. So now you're looking at 35, 40%. Just right off the top, hiring the same qualified people. And of course, you always hire directly from your membership. And that's the amazing thing on these cooperatives. They have found that when you have over 200 members, they become extremely sustainable, durable, because of the breadth and the depth of all the knowledge, the experience that each shareholder brings to the table. You figured you could make another 5 or 10% just on the bulk discounts. So you see, by owning your own construction company and your agricultural group and your cattle manufacturing, see, you can provide goods, services, jobs, and income under that structure, under that land co-op, and get the benefits. In addition, if you have 250 agricultural producers, now let me qualify here. A producer is somebody that either owns the agricultural producing land and manages it or operates it, or they contract with somebody else who either leases it or sharecrops. Either one of those individuals would qualify as an agricultural producer, which is required to belong to an agricultural cooperative. So a farmer's market, if you had 250 families that each had their own greenhouse and they were producing their fruits and vegetables, and because you have 250 small producers, now you've got enough quantity that now you can set up an account with somebody like Associated Grocers, providing organic fruits and vegetables. Now with the farmers market, you would also have your co-op store and bulk purchasing. See, we talked about a consumer type co-op, continually cutting costs, because you're not dealing with the profit and this large overhead. And instead of having 250 people have to set up their own distribution, you have one distribution outlet. And so it brings the cost down for everybody. Sales outlet, okay, not only selling fruits and vegetables that the individual shareholders may be producing, as well as the grain and the alfalfa and other things. In other words, selling that which you don't need. But also, with these 250 shareholders, many of them are going to have their own home-based business or cottage industry, so to speak, whether it's baking, whether it's raising rabbits, whether it's IT, fixing computers, or any number of things that are required in a community. So by having a single outlet, you can have a brick and mortar and an online outlet. And again, the cost to participate, that comes way down because you have so many consumers, producers, and manufacturers all associated under one umbrella. Now, for that 1,245 acres or 1,250 acres, you notice Grania Porcon, they developed their own tourist industry. Now, if you have your own RV camping park, see, now there's additional services, jobs, and income that can be brought into the community to help pay for other expenses that are associated with running a community, such as roads and right-of-ways and green belts. But here's another advantage to putting in an RV camping park. Most people today, their equity and their savings is tied up in their homes. They may have somewhere between $75,000, $100,000 to $200,000, $300,000. If you had to do this all by yourself, you're talking $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. But because we're able to reduce the cost, expand the activities, and collapse the time frames, then we can make this $100,000 to $300,000 work to bring about a house on 2 acres with water rights that's passive solar. So it requires zero or near zero energy for heating and cooling, a barn, a greenhouse, a garden and orchard with your own well, your own power, and your own approved sanitation. That 2 acres becomes totally self-reliant, totally self-reliant. It's like a building brick. You've got dirt, you've got water, you can produce food, you got shelter, you got power, and you got sanitation. You've reduced the challenges of having a single point of failure. If you had a bunch of people on one well and it goes down, that's a problem. But if one individual well goes down, you still have 4 neighbors that can help you get through the challenging time. So I want you to just consider this. If you have 250 of these self-reliant 2-acre parcels, what kind of community can you build? You can build a community with all these individuals that have cottage industries, whether it's a mechanic, whether it's a beekeeper, whether it's a school teacher or a music teacher or IT, whatever goods and services we're using today are still needed in a community that's self-reliant. So to be able to do all this, we got to have the knowledge component, all right? And this is where the Academy of Self-Reliance comes in. It provides the know-how, okay? So the Academy of Self-Reliance is a 501c3 private foundation, and it's also a cooperative partner of Operation Self-Reliance. We have online instruction and 11 other learning aids. Now you can watch videos all day long, but until you have your hands-on workshops, till you get your hands in the dirt or on whatever it is you're working with, it's not yours. It's just an idea out there. But once you can start doing it, it becomes yours. Now, I'm going to take this moment right here and say, you know, if you give somebody a fish, you feed them for a day. If you teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. But at the Academy of Self-Reliance, a partner to Operation Self-Reliance, we believe that if you can teach someone how to teach self-reliance, you can feed a nation. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, the Academy of Self-Reliance, the Foundation for Higher Learning, we participate in research. We want to know what's the bottom line. How many resources does it take, not counting labor, because everybody's labor pool is different. What would it take for a family of 2 to make the transition from the city to the country culture as we've defined it, remaining debt-free and among like-minded neighbors? A family of 4, a family of 6. We want to know what the bottom line is we can do. And I have to tell you, we have found that you can end up with your 2 acres, that you can have a house that's passive solar, a barn, a greenhouse, a garden, an orchard with a well, solar, and approved sanitation. At this point in time, we found that you can do this for less than $120,000. We believe we can get it down to below $100,000. We have a couple contractors that are working on this. Again, the objective of Operation Self-Reliance is to be able to reduce the cost, expand the activities, and collapse the timeframes. And those that are familiar with lean construction, lean manufacturing, eliminating waste, being agile, these are all things that we're incorporating in Operation Self-Reliance. Now, these are some of the other things that we teach in the Academy, all right? I want you to look at this Alberta peach tree. It was purchased from Cook's Nursery in May of 2008. At the end of that same season in September, you can see the size. That's my friend's granddaughter in the back there, showing you how much it grew in one season. And then at the end of the second season in September of 2009, you have a full-sized fruit-bearing peach tree. I've had peaches off of that tree. We teach you how you can get 3 years of growth by utilizing a foliar feed. These are things that are taught on the Academy of Self-Reliant. We teach you how to take a dry cucumber seed to plant in 72 hours. This is a friend of mine's garden. Okay, his name's Mike. He lives in Eager, Arizona. But he was told that he couldn't grow a good garden there because it was too high, too dry, and too cold. I've had produce out of this harvest. What was amazing is a portion of this garden is on top of a gravel driveway. It took him 3 years using the Back to Eden program to have this type of produce. Again, if you have some knowledge, some skill, and the wisdom to implement it, it's amazing what can be done. We teach permaculture. Now, we're not permaculture purists. Bottom line, learning to work with nature so that you're not poisoning it. You're not letting the water run off and carry your topsoil. So we teach you how to work with the earth, how to sculpt the earth, how that you can actually retain all the water that comes onto your property so that you can take advantage. Now, whether you want to create a food forest or you're a little more organized in how you want to put this out there, your land can now feed you because you have the knowledge, the skill, and the wisdom, and the desire to be self-reliant. We teach you alternative methods and materials, okay? Here we just show a couple. You've got rammed earth, compressed earth blocks. We also teach you about insulated concrete forms. We teach you about all-weather wood foundation. 25 years ago, I was introduced to all-weather wood foundation. This is lumber that's been treated, and third-party testing has shown that it has twice the life expectancy of concrete. This is lumber that's been treated so that it is direct earth contact rated. This is found in the Uniform Building Code. They've had it in there for over 50 years. It's really hard for contractors to make a change. Everybody looks at wood and they see that it rots if it hasn't been treated, or some of the old treatments that would poison the ground. See, they've eliminated this. But this wood has a 109-year third-party testing life expectancy, 1/2 the price of concrete. They've been utilizing it for over a half a century. They use it down in the bayous. They use it up north where it's too cold to pour concrete. I've built a duplex. So these things work. The other things we're talking about, if you have a labor pool, then you can really build with way less expensive materials that will provide an amazing envelope for keeping warm in the winter and cool in the summer. We teach about greenhouses. You can put a greenhouse in the ground and cut your heating and cooling costs by 30-40%. We actually teach you how you can use geothermal. So you can take advantage of that 50-55 degree temperature that's found below the frost line. For example, this one drawing here shows you how that you can create the ventilation for heating and cooling in your greenhouse without a motor or fans, just opening and closing vents. How do we know that this works? Well, yeah, you look around in nature. But here is one template we're looking at, Russ Finch, really cool guy to talk to. Do research, you can look up greenhouse in the snow. He's been raising citrus since 1979 in western Nebraska. His trees in his greenhouse are 12 feet high. He gets approximately 125 pounds a year per tree. He gets $4 a pound. At least that was the last one I talked to him. He sells everything that he can produce, plus he grows flowers and other things for sale in between his trees. Here's the cool part. Though he has this extreme weather, minus 26 degrees in the winter, up to 106 in the summer, his heating and cooling costs are 96 cents a day. We share with you, we teach you how to utilize these principle-based practical solutions. We help you to understand what to plant and how. The first 25 or so webinars that we have, if you'll do the assignments, they'll help you create your transitional path, because you will now know what is wanted, why you want it, how you're going to obtain it, how you're going to maintain it, where you're going to put it, and when. It's project management. We not only teach you the practical solutions that are principle-based, but we also teach you the critical elements of project management. Now, I got to tell you, every mother that's out there is an amazing project manager. We're just adding some names to the activities she goes through and then helping us apply those skills in making a transition for a healthy, safe, family-oriented community. We teach you how to harvest, how to preserve. But to truly understand and be self-reliant, you've got to know more. You've got to understand the difference between iceberg lettuce and kale. Kale is one of the highest dense vegetables, and yet it only takes about the same space as iceberg lettuce, the same amount of water. But kale is way more nutritious for you. And with all of the health challenges that are coming with the viruses and everything, the number one thing that we can do to fight off the disease is have a healthy immune system with a healthy body. In fact, we have a webinar that was put on by Dr. Christensen, First Aid Out of Your Garden. And then he put together another series for us, which is called The Path to Optimum Health. We understand that many people in our current lifestyle is sedentary. So if you get a bunch of us older guys out there and we start doing hard work and we're not used to it, we're going to end up having some heart attacks. That's just the long and the short of it. So health and having an optimum pathway to health is essential in preparing every needful thing. Cash crops. Money is something that we need, all right? So you either have a cottage industry or you have a cash crop. Here's an example. In China, they're reclaiming the Gobi Desert, all right? They're planting trees. Okay, we know that that's the first thing you do. But one of the cash crops they're putting out there in the desert is licorice. Licorice has not only nutritional, but medicinal, and it is drought tolerant. So is learning about different cash crops. Again, you want to know what is wanted, why do you want it, because that'll affect what you want if you understand the why, how you're going to obtain it, how you're going to maintain it, where you're going to put it, and when. These are all critical things that a self-reliant person really goes through. They don't go, oh, they show up at some preparedness store and say, what do I need? Understand that preparing every needful thing takes some thought and consideration. That's the reason the PATH series has been provided by the Academy. So it's essentially we cover bees to worms, garden's best friends. Here are some of the webinars that were originally started in here. I highly recommend on the March 21st, that was done last year on March 21st, solar power. Okay, this webinar was put on by Solark. That's SOL-ARK, solark.com. The reason this is important is this is the only solar package that we found that is EMP hardened. And if you don't understand what an EMP is, then I highly recommend you get access to this Solark, and you can go to solark.com. But these were military engineers who were doing EMP testing for the military, and then they determined that they wanted to create a system for their families. And out of that, they came up with this amazing thing. And it's not a bunch of Faraday cages and stuff that you can't really prove, because there's a lot of critical path elements that if you deviate a little bit, then it mitigates your whole protection. Whereas these engineers have put together a system. The last time I checked, it had been over 6 years since it had any returns. So 4 and 5 continue. Don't know how, don't know anyone. This is where the hands-on projects that we have. In fact, we have 5-day workshops coming up at the end of June and in July and August. And this is just a list of some of these. Hands-on well drilling, hands-on building a greenhouse, hands-on doing rammed earth, hands-on working with a permanent wood foundation. You actually get to participate, hands-on, see before, during, and after. Rabbits, for example, Ben Goodson is committed to teaching our rabbit class. He is a rabbit judge up in Cache County. He will take you from day one, creating your own rabbit cage, talking about the genetics, choosing the right kind of rabbits, the breeding program, the feeding, the maintenance, everywhere, clear up until the last day when you're cooking your own rabbit. So this is truly hands-on. This is not a bunch of videos. And again, I want to reiterate, you give somebody a fish, you feed them for a day. If you teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. But if you can teach them how to teach how to fish, we can feed a nation. Fun activities. In preparing every needful thing, you got to have fun, guys. Life's hard, but you got to have fun. So we have the activities, the ranch tours. By the way, on the ranch, it's in a valley. And the water aquifer is fed from 2 different mountain ranges, and there's a ton of history on each side, as well as the history of the ranch. And there's biking and four-wheeling and rock hounding, and there's a ton of fun things. 15 miles south of us, there's some hot springs. And of course, there's the camping, but the fresh air, the open skies. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the tools that has made this so viable for families with limited resources is the Utah Code Title III. This is the Uniform Agricultural Cooperative Association Act. This act enables the small agricultural producer to come together with other small agricultural producers and get a leg up. There's tax advantages. And this is not a scheme to get by. This is a legitimate state-sponsored program, and actually they have similar programs with the federal government. But this is helping the small person be able to get on top of the game, to get going. We have incorporated Randon Wilson, who is one of the premier agricultural cooperative attorneys in the United States. He set up agricultural cooperatives all over the United States and Canada. And he's the one that's introduced all of these amazing opportunities associated with an agricultural co-op. As I mentioned, a little over a year ago, 2 partners came together and we created the first Utah OSR land cooperative. This is an amazing group of families, okay? In fact, this is a piece of property that's under contract. It's out in the West Desert. This was 2 weeks last spring before that whole area turned purple with spring flowers that came out. The history of this property here was that in 1970 there was 9 separate farms there, and then one gentleman bought them all up and put them all together and started producing. They've grown wheat and corn and alfalfa and barley. It's an amazing piece of ground. A little over 2.5 miles long. Some of it is half a mile or wider. Truly an agricultural opportunity. It's out in the West Desert, for which we're grateful for because it's pesticide free. This is a little better description here. 1,245 acres, almost 3 miles long. Now there's 2,855 acre feet of water. Okay, and there's currently 5 wells on the property. The lease has been paid up through November of 2022. Our next payment puts the property in our name. Here's the fun part. We are able to do this for $20,000 to get your 2 acres and the water, owning your own construction company and all the other benefits that were described under the agricultural cooperative umbrella. So, and then the remaining acreage is available to provide goods, services, jobs, and income for all of the shareholders. Now, when you're preparing every needful thing, there's a lot of stuff. So the board of directors has set aside 40 acres, providing 40 acres with water in the Utah OSR Land Co-op. Part of that 40 acres is being used for the campus for the Academy of Self-Reliance, Higher Education and Research, along with a K-12 private school campus. Also an assisted living retirement home, a whole health life coach clinic. One of our board of directors is a dentist who's putting together a mobile clinic. And in addition, we're creating a child rescue home and a young mother's home. We understand that families, especially in today's lifestyle, have challenges. And so we want to be able to help, whether it's our own families or an opportunity to bring a rescued child into an amazing environment. Included in this 40 acres is going to be an equine and canine therapy barn. The horse therapy helps these young people that have been abused so that they can learn to trust again. And then we'll be able to transfer the trust from the animal now to other people so that they can continue to grow and take their place in society in a safe, healthy environment. And then, of course, the canine, the dog therapy for the senior citizens. The quality of life goes way up when you have a pet, when you have a companion that can be with you. And so this 40 acres is being set aside as a community trust that can only be used for these 7 activities here. And the barrier to much of these activities has been the cost of the land and the water Whereas the board of directors has said, look, we will provide this land at $1 a year for a 49-year lease that's renewable. And I might mention there, the Academy of Self-Reliance, we're in the process of putting a program together and raising funds for a state-of-the-art ropes course, because we want the young people to be able to develop some confidence, to have some resilience, to practice their problem-solving skills and their team-building skills. Becoming self-reliant isn't just a switch in your brain. We have to re-educate ourselves to a way of thinking, adding knowledge, skill, and wisdom. Now, people want to know, is this happening? Yes, it's happening. We've already been out working the land since last May. We've already done test crops, bee forage. We've got wells going. These are some of the activities that have taken place. And the water has been tested. The soil has been tested multiple times. And it's amazing, this oasis that's coming together out in the middle of the desert. Again, OSR is about reducing the cost, expanding the activity, collapsing the time frame of helping families transition to a 2-acre parcel with a passive solar home, a barn, a greenhouse, a garden, an orchard, a well, solar, and approved sanitation with like-minded neighbors while remaining debt-free. We're continually looking for strategies to reduce the costs. Here's a couple machines the OSR Land Co-op has actually built and ready for manufacturing, small farm implements. The one that you see there on the left is able to create a raised bed, lay a drip line, spread the mulch plastic, and cover the edges with dirt all in one pass. So we're surveying courtesy wells. It's an amazing project. And if you're interested and want more information, we encourage you to come to academyosr.com, also to the osrcommunity.com, and check us out on Facebook. Also, here's our contact information. Thank you very much for taking time to learn about OSR. We have some challenging things facing us, and this is a tremendous opportunity for families to become self-reliant with like-minded neighbors while remaining debt-free. We invite you to connect with us either on Facebook or through the email contact information there. And in the meantime, Godspeed.